All right. Switch for everyone to sit down. All right. Obviously, you guys know important people. When they step on the stage, everyone gets quiet. My name is Rotimi Thomas, and this is Petra Helu. We are the outgoing co-presidents of the Business in Africa Club here at the FICO School of Business. And we would just like to thank each and every one of you for making it out here this morning. Give yourselves a round of applause. This club started 2 years ago with one of our alumni in the room right now, Ope Onibokun. If everyone could please help me thank this individual for starting, helping start something very special here at Duke and helping us carve out a space for Africa, not only at the business school, but also at Duke University and also in the Carolinas. This conference here today is focused on opportunity and impact. Our goal is not to have an African business club at the FICO School of Business or in the Carolinas. It's to have a club that educates people and our classmates and people in the region about business in Africa. So to all our speakers, that's the message we would like to try and get across to our classmates and people in the room today, is that there are opportunities, and we would like to educate our classmates and the people in the audience about that today. To kick the conference off, I will have Todd Newman, who is he's the head of North America for South African Airways, and he's based at the Carrier's North America headquarters in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Newman oversees functions for passenger sales, marketing, reservations, sales, and airport operations for SAAs in the U.S., Canada, Caribbean, Mexico, and Central America. Newman joined South African Airways in 2006 as Vice President of Sales, responsible for passenger sales strategies and business development. I'd like to let you guys know that South African Airways is a platinum sponsor of this conference, and that's coming from last year when we had no sponsors at all. So we're extremely appreciative. We have a number of students in the audience that just got back from a global exchange programs in South Africa, and a number of us were in South Africa over break just learning about the culture there. So we hope this is a relationship that can develop over time. And with that, I would like to invite Todd Newman to the stage to kick things off. I would like to let everyone know there is a fire drill today at 10 o'clock. So don't be alarmed. We'll just have everyone go out and bring everyone back in if the fire alarm does go off, and continue with the conference. But with that, I'll invite Todd Newman to the stage.
Thank you, Rotimi. Being an airline person, I'm always concerned with safety. It's important that I point out the emergency exits in preparation for our fire drill. Good morning, everyone. Before I get started, I would certainly like to acknowledge Deputy Prime Minister of Zimbabwe, Mr. Arthur Mutambarhar, and welcome him to Duke University. In addition to that, Mr. William Boulding, Dean of the J.B. Fuqua School of Business, and Mr. Russ Morgan, Associate Professor of the Practice of Marketing. A warm welcome as well to all of our guest speakers and distinguished guests, so thank you. It's both a pleasure and a privilege to be among such a distinguished group of friends and partners of the African continent. It's gratifying to know that the continent can count on so many advocates in its corner, all looking for ways to harness the tremendous potential that exists in Africa. Thank you to Duke University, the Fuqua School of Business, and certainly the Business in Africa Club. The university should be proud of its role in incubating ideas and strategies to further growth through today's students, which will be tomorrow's leaders. We appreciate the opportunity to work alongside the school and participate throughout the day in this important dialogue regarding Africa. As South Africa's national airline, South African Airways relishes its role in helping the continent grow and prosper and become an ever more influential player in the global stage. Facilitating ties between the African continent and the globe is a mission that we take very seriously. We pride ourselves on being Africa's most awarded airline and representing and furthering the business and social interests of South Africa and the continent. To get started, I'd like to provide you with a little background on South African Airways for those of you that may not be familiar with our product. I will also provide you with an overview of SAA's strategic direction and our efforts to further assist in developing the economic collaboration between the U.S. and nations throughout Africa. South African Airways is Africa's oldest airline, providing service to, from, and within the African continent for almost 80 years, and serving the U.S. for nearly 45 years. We have the largest fleet of modern aircraft and the most extensive route network throughout the continent of any airline in Africa. We operate the most service from the U.S. to South Africa, with daily nonstop service from New York JFK Airport to our hub in Johannesburg, which is complemented by daily service from Washington Dulles to Johannesburg via Dakar, Senegal. Our hub in Johannesburg offers connections to 45 destinations throughout the African continent and Africa's Indian Ocean islands. South African Airways has long been admired by business and leisure travelers for safety, high-quality service, and warm South African hospitality. We have achieved our place as a Skytrax 4-star airline for 11 consecutive years and are consistently recognized by global industry experts and from leading business travel publications in the U.S. for the quality of our service and our expertise in mastering long-haul travel. To further enhance our customers' experience, SAA is a member of the Star Alliance, the world's largest alliance. We have a marketing code-share partnership with United Airlines, U.S. Airways, and Air Canada that offers convenient connections for travelers from 30 cities throughout the U.S. and North America to destinations throughout our Africa route network. SAA's membership in the Star Alliance means that members of these and other Star Alliance member mileage programs can earn and redeem miles for travel on South African Airways and have access to Star Alliance airport member lounges in over 900 locations worldwide. Among its many benefits, one that's unique to the Star Alliance is that we have 3 African carriers that are part of the Star Alliance: South African Airways, Ethiopian Airlines, and Egypt Air. It's truly one alliance that represents the best of the African continent and offers the most extensive travel options between its different countries. SAA also has important partnerships beyond the Star Alliance, one of these being with JetBlue Airways, and we also code-share with JetBlue out of 18 cities throughout the U.S. and have interline relationships with Virgin America and Canada's Porter Airlines. All of these relationships serve to expand SAA's footprint in North America. Over the years, just as South Africa and the continent have changed, we have also seen changes in the North American market. For years, South African Airways has focused predominantly on the leisure traveler in North America. While leisure travel continues to be a very strong and important channel of business for us, which provides travelers to experience the rich culture, the amazing landscapes, and the incredible wildlife of Africa, it's also renowned, and in recent years, we've added focus to the business traveler and the commercial opportunities that are developing within the region. Africa is booming, and SAA intends to be part of that growth, to both help move it along while capitalizing on it. With the ongoing progress of the Republic of South Africa's democratic government, and now South Africa's membership in BRICS, Johannesburg has emerged as the regional economic capital that is driving business growth and commerce on the African continent and a natural transition point between different countries. Beyond BRICS, we have seen in recent years U.S. government organizations, many Fortune 500 companies, and other commercial entities have established operations or acquired companies based in South Africa or in Southern Africa. In many cases, they've chosen Johannesburg as the regional headquarters and often use it as a hub to connect back and forth to other markets throughout the region. Looking at Southern Africa, the economies have been traditionally dependent on mining or natural resources, but are now becoming more globally diversified to include technology, pharmaceuticals, petroleum, healthcare, and banking investments. Pharmaceutical companies such as GlaxoSmithKline, Procter & Gamble, Pfizer, and Johnson & Johnson continue to aggressively expand in the region as they research and market new products to developing nations on the African continent. Financial institutions such as Citibank, JP Morgan Chase, Ernst & Young, and HSBC are examples of many financial institutions that are benefiting from emerging markets in Africa and establishing operations and making meaningful investments in the region. As many of you may know, Miller and Coors Beer, two well-known beverages synonymous with Americana, are actually owned by South African breweries based in Johannesburg. And given the time change between here and South Africa, I'd say it's Miller time. That cup of Starbucks coffee that you might have been enjoying this morning may have been purchased by their buyers from some of the coffee fields of Kenya or Ethiopia. These are but a few of examples of the U.S.-based companies that are now doing business in Africa. All this enhanced business development has generated new travel opportunities between North America and Southern Africa, requiring SAA to shift more business towards a business traveler. As I mentioned, part of our role and responsibility as the national carrier is to help foster this commercial and economic development on the continent on multiple levels with a variety of business partners. We take that mission very seriously, and we understand our role in facilitating the growth process. As a business, it's imperative that we evolve along with the continent with a base of operations in Africa. Throughout the years, we've worked closely with partners in both the South African and U.S. governments, as well as the private sector, to do our part in ensuring that South Africans, Africans, and U.S. interests abroad are being proactively supported. For this purpose, SAA has taken an active role and a leadership position in many organizations in North America that assist towards achieving that goal, such as the Corporate Council on Africa, the South African American Business Council, and we also value and support the important work of the Business Unity South Africa. One strong opportunity for South African Airways to capitalize and being an important channel of business for us is with the U.S. government. Being a member of the Star Alliance and having the ability to code share with United Airlines and now U.S. Airways on our flights between the U.S. and South Africa qualifies SAA as a compliant carrier for U.S. government and U.S. government-funded travel under the Fly America Act. We have also established ties with the U.S. Embassy and the American Chamber of Commerce in Johannesburg as they work on the ground there to facilitate market entry for U.S. businesses in Africa. With all these opportunities I've outlined, naturally SAA is interested in expanding and strengthening our presence in the U.S., making even more convenient service available to more of Africa. To do so, we seek to fully leverage the synergies that can be generated by our commercial partnerships both in North America and on the African continent. This will allow us to more fully meet the needs of all African travelers and U.S. travelers, support our partners, provide critical regional and intercontinental links that lead to growth. But as with all opportunities, there are certainly challenges. The challenges I see is that air service is not only a reflection of the economically vibrant society, but it itself is a driver of growth. Without air service, it's very hard to attract business and commercial development that are needed in order to enable markets to grow. Without market demand for air service, there simply is no economic incentive and hence no commercial need to advance accessibility. And without an economic base, there are fewer resources to fund the development of the much-needed infrastructure. Truly, it's a double-edged sword for many countries with a question of how to invest in aviation infrastructure. I believe three of the most fundamental prerequisites for enhancing air service market accessibility include sufficient market demand, a favorable regulatory and aeropolitical environment, and an adequate infrastructure. I think it might be a myth to say that there is no single Africa market. Looking at some data recently published by Aviation Daily, I was struck by the statistic that notes that the ratio of available seat miles to the population size in Africa is about 1/5 of that of the world average. While this statistic is quite accurate, it masks the fact that within the continent there are countries such as South Africa and Egypt where air transport services are abundant, and other nations, particularly in West and Central Africa, where service is far more sparse. Difference in the GDP and per capita income within the region can undoubtedly explain the variances in the level of air service. Looking deeper at these variations, the fundamental fact is that air service cannot be sustained without the underlying economic activity to support it. One could argue that facilitating investment in aviation and airport infrastructure is critical to ensuring growth on the continent. Without the requisite of air service, it would be difficult to convince businesses to invest in the local economy, since reliable air service is often a symbol of the market's sophistication and market growth opportunities. The challenge I see is that air service is not only a reflection of the economically vibrant society, but itself is a driver of growth. Without air service, it's very hard to attract businesses and commercial development that are needed in order to enable markets to grow. Without market demand for air service, there's simply no economic incentive and no commercial need to advance accessibility. It's also critical to ensure the success and growth of African airlines. African airlines face challenges that put it at a disadvantage versus other international airlines. For instance, fuel prices are at historically high, and African airlines must pay for their fuel in US dollars, despite trading or generating revenue in their local currencies. Another challenge African airlines face is the lack of bilateral air service agreements between African countries, a development that has historically blocked the growth of intra-Africa flights. These challenges have opened up opportunities for non-African airlines to grow their networks on the continent, often quickly receiving flying rights not previously afforded to African airlines, and shifting market share from them as a result. It's not to say that international airlines should not allowed to fly within the continent, as they present a certain financial benefit, but African airlines need to be on a more level playing field, one that the continent can tangibly benefit through the much-needed jobs and related commercial opportunities. When international airlines fly into the continent, they are simply tasked with turning a profit on the route. African airlines, on the other hand, while tasked with the same, are also invested in and responsible for growth and vibrancy of the continent. No outside carrier can know and represent the interests of the continent like an African carrier, particularly with the growth of the all-important intra-Africa routes. African airlines proudly fly the flag of their home country and actively promote their local industries. For SAA, one such example is our promotion of the South African wine industry. SAA exclusively features South Africa's award-winning wines and features it as our wine cellar in the sky. It's helped expose the South African wine industry to the world and has no doubt contributed to the growth of this local industry. This is one of many examples of how an African airline can directly contribute to the growth of the economy on the continent. I'm pleased to report, though, that there's been progress made in this regard. Many African governments have begun to open their borders to regional flights from African airlines. In the past 18 months, as a matter of fact, SAA has launched service between Johannesburg and 7 new destinations on the continent, including Andola, Kigali, Bujumbura, Pointe-Noire, Cotonou, Abidjan, and Brazzaville. And as we continue to review in new and emerging markets throughout Africa. For SAA, it's a tremendous source of pride that we can now serve these markets and help trade and commerce grow between the respective countries. These are examples of how, with the collective support and respective governments, industry partners, and stakeholders from the public and private sector, Africa's economic growth can be invigorated. Africa is the new economic frontier for the globe, and African countries can be active participants in its future. South African Airways' mission is to help spur that growth, seeking new and emerging destinations to connect, opening these markets to the world through SAA's convenient, comfortable, and reliable service. The message that I'm hoping to communicate to you today is that corporate and government segment of the business has become a very important channel for development at South African Airways as part of our mission to contribute to the growth in Africa. We are guided by that mission, and we help to forge ties and facilitate new opportunities for business on both sides of the continent. Just as rising tides lift all boats, growth and prosperity in Africa can only benefit its people. In today's global economy, funding growth through international links is inevitable and smart, and ensuring continued and vibrant air service between Africa and the United States, as well as within Africa, is vital to this mission. South African Airways continues to play a prominent role. Thank you once again for allowing SAA to present this opportunity and participate in the Business in Africa Conference. And even more importantly, for your support in fostering the economic development of the African continent. To do so, we seek to fully leverage the synergies that can be generated by our commercial partnerships, both here in North America and on the African continent. This will allow us to fully meet the needs of all African travelers, support our partners, and provide critical regional as well as intercontinental links. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Todd, and thank you very much, SAA, for your wonderful sponsorship of this event. And I can say, as a contented customer of SAA, I've had that wine that you spoke of on the flight, and I'll be back for more. So, as you may have noticed, there was no fire alarm at 10. I think anybody here affiliated with Duke got a text message, so you might have noticed that. But we're going to power through and lead to the opening remarks from our two distinguished guests. So, my name is Brenda Mullen. I'm a second year here at Fuqua, and I'm a future Johannesburg resident. So thank you very much for the distinguished guests, the Deputy Prime Minister of Zimbabwe, for being here, and for all of my fellow classmates. I'm grateful for the opportunity today to introduce two dynamic and impactful women. First, let me speak to Professor Reuben, who will be introducing Advocate Brenda. You told me I was not going to be able to pronounce this correctly, but I'm going to try it. Madumise. No, that's not good. All right, we'll see. So, Professor Reuben is a professor of the practice of business administration at Duke University's Fuqua School of Business, serving as director of the PhD Pipeline Opportunity Program and as curriculum director for the LEAD Summer Business Institute. She's taught and written in various areas of finance and emerging domestic markets, and has conducted seminars and made presentations in the U.S. and in various other countries, provided financial analysis in regulatory cases, and given expert witness testimony before legislative and judiciary bodies, including the U.S. House of Representatives. So I imagine this is a little bit less intimidating of an environment today. She's a graduate of Oberlin College, earned a PhD and MBA with distinction from the University of Michigan, pursued postdoctoral studies in business-related fields, and holds lifetime memberships in the National Black MBA Association, the National Council of Negro Women, and the NAACP. And I'm told she is well-versed in witty repartee, so I think we should look forward to this Q&A. As for advocate... As for Brenda, I spoke to her this morning. I said, Brenda, I've seen your bio. It's long, it's illustrious, but I need some personal, touch so that we can, understand who we're hearing up there today. And she said, Brenda, it's simple. I'm married and I have 2 kids. I was like, that's great. She said, I start every morning with lime and water, and I've once hosted Serena Williams at my home in Africa. It's pretty neat. But on top of that, she's the chairwoman of Business Unity South Africa, an organization whose function is to ensure that business plays a constructive role in the country's economic growth, development, and transformation, and to create an environment in which businesses of all sizes and in all sectors can thrive, expand, and be competitive. She served as a member of the Mineral and Petroleum Development Board. She's edited 2 books. She was a visiting fellow of the UN Human Rights Commission. She's currently the chairman of CAFCITA. It's a larger acronym than you want me to spell out, but it's impressive, I assure you. And also serves on the board of Hospitality Fund, Transaction Capital, Railway Safety Regulator, and Salt Employee Benefits, Heart in Igagasi FM in Zyko Museums. And with that, I'm going to welcome these 2 women to the stage, and we look forward to hearing what you have to offer this morning. Thank you very much.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm going to start off with a little bit of high maintenance. Martin, can we get 2 bottles of water? Thank you. Because I believe we're going to have a good conversation. And as we do that, let me also thank Martin Ganda, Rotini Thomas for being the conference co-chairs and all the persons who've worked with them, as well as, of course, the Business in Africa Club co-presidents, Petra and Rotimi, who you've already heard from this morning. We thank them. And we recognize again Opie, who not only organized the Business in Africa Club with his colleagues, starting as a first-year student in the midst of all those core courses, but held the first conference during that year. And so we thank each and every one of you for what you do and the leadership that you are displaying even at this point in time. So we know, despite all of the challenges, that the world is in good hands for the future. Yeah. I also take the opportunity to again thank all of the participants who've come from across the globe and across the seaboard and across from coast to coast. I believe we have representation here really from coast to coast, up and down the eastern seaboard and across the globe, and we know that this really indicates your commitment to what you do, and at least as importantly, to the education of tomorrow's leaders for a better world. So we know that you have valuable time and important responsibilities, and yet you've taken the time to be here. So I echo my thanks and the thanks for the Fuqua School for your participation in this event. Thank you. Let me just get started by, of course, I'm sure you are reading the biographies and biographical sketches of the distinguished participants, and that you have read or are reading that of our speaker, Madam Chairman of the Business Unity South Africa, Madam Chairman Madumise. Thank you very kindly for being here. And let us just start by asking you to describe for us Business Unity South Africa and its importance in moving forward the continent's largest economy.
Thank you, Lucy. This morning at 3 a.m. I was up, struggling to sleep. And immediately had an idea that I called Martin this morning. I said, can we project the map of the continent as we have this conversation this morning? So that's why you have this map this morning. And I'm going to share with you why I've done that. So let me start with the greeting so that you understand what this continent represents. So some of you will respond, others won't respond because you might not understand the language. So Bordia, that's Portuguese. You've got Luso African countries, Angola. Let me just point them out with my, I hope it's working. Anyway, Jambo, that's Swahili. You find that in East Africa. Bonjour, French. You've got West Africa, French-speaking countries in the continent. Guten Morgen, German. You've got Namibia and a little bit in Rwanda and Burundi. Buenos dias, Spanish. You'll find it in the Central Republic of Africa. Dumela, that's my language, in southern Sotho. Molweni, that's Xhosa, that Eastern Cape, is represented by Cindy here. Absheni, it's Shangaan, that you find up in South Africa. Dimateroni, that's another one you find up in South Africa. Sanbonani, that's Zulu, you find in Natal, KwaZulu Natal, that I think most of you want to be Zulu. I think is the easiest language to understand. Huemore, that's Africans that you find. You have Tobela, which is Northern Sotho. You also find up in South Africa. And then good morning, that you all might understand. So that's literally what Africa represents this morning. And thank you, Lucy, for the opportunity to have this conversation. But to say thank you to Martin for being so persistent. It was in November last year with Motuma here in New York. He said it fleetingly that he's organizing this conference, he'd like us to be here. I dismissed it. And in January, lo and behold, emails started coming fast and furious. And in March, on the 20th, I find myself in North Carolina. Never thought I'd be here. So thank you very much for... Prime Minister Mutambara, he just flew in himself. He's just had a referendum. So please ask him about that referendum, the results of that referendum, and going forward for Zimbabwe. The organization that I represent, I wear too many hats, and please allow me to be schizophrenic today, so that you have the appreciation and get the best out of me. The organization that I represent is Business Unity South Africa. And I'm going to underscore unity because the organization, when it was first put together, it was bringing two businesses, black business and white business. If you're talking to any South African, race becomes very important. So we can't run away from it. So bear with us because it's who we are currently. So you brought solid, organized white business together with not so organized black business because government at the time was saying we can't talk to different voices of business. We need one voice of business so that it's easy for us to intervene appropriately when required. That's what led to the formation of Business Unity South Africa, taking established white business and established black business to carve a vision for South African business in the country. It has taken us, 8 years to do exactly that. We represent American businesses from Citigroup to American Chamber of Business. They're members of Business Unity South Africa. You've got small manufacturing companies that are part of Business Unity South Africa. Major corporates are part of Business Unity South Africa. Women businesses are part of Business South Africa. So it's a melting pot of business with diverse interest. And how do you represent different voices that have got different agendas and interest? To strike that balance, it's always a challenge. But we try to find the most common agenda items that we can all rally behind. For instance, if we talk of any tax changes or tax law amendments, I think most businesses are always looking for a reprieve and tax relaxation. So when you bring together all the businesses, we are able to agree that this is good for business or not good for business. But there are instances where you would have different views coming from business, because it depends on the size of your business, which industry it finds itself, and where it's located, that you would make different interventions at given time. So Business Unity South Africa is the mouthpiece, one single voice of business that engages across the political spectrum, engages across the region. We interact fully with SADC. You know that the region is broken down into regional blocks. So you've got the South African, the SADC region, you've got COMESA, you've got East Africa, and you will see that BUSA facilitates the discussions around tariffs, for instance, with SADC countries and East countries and West Africa. So we're quite busy as an organization trying to represent the interest of businessmen and women.
Thank you for that explanation, and that will helpfully lead into my next question.
Yeah.
I think in many ways we still in the U.S. have much to learn, even from your experience in South Africa and post-apartheid South Africa. As I think about the U.S. and particularly having grown up in the Carolinas and things that we're still, challenges we're still coping with in terms of economic development and equity in the States. I recall a couple of sessions that I've had with students at the Wits Business School and entrepreneurship, but in particularly the questions I got at the University of Fort Hare talking to some of their business students when I told them that we are really rolling back what we euphemistically and otherwise call affirmative action here at a time when the recent data show a growing income, and after the recession, the largest wealth gap ever in the U.S. in terms of race relations. And as I hear the discussions about the challenges, the performance of ANC government, etc., I am reminded that we are grappling with issues for now about 150 years that we still haven't dealt with. And I would like to hear from you, particularly in terms of its socioeconomic importance, some description and share with our audience about Black economic empowerment and even how it evolved into the broadly based Black economic empowerment and the importance of that initiative.
Okay. Now, for those understanding South Africa and its history, it's very important for me to answer the question that you just posed on Black economic empowerment and having an appreciation of what that country came from. So I'm going to give a quick snippet of that. You had, it was a colony, colonized by the British, and finally you had the war between the British and the Afrikaners. When you trace back the history, Jan van Riebeeck, Vasco da Gama, and all of them coming into the Cape to create a trading place for those Europeans coming from Europe and creating the Dutch East India Company. So I'm taking you back to history when you were at elementary school. And you had a vast country, massive country, with indigenous people in South Africa. You had wars, the Boer War, and you had the Nationalist Party coming into power in 1948, and coming into power with a very clear policy on how they were going to be advancing the country. We have discovered diamond, we have discovered gold, we have discovered all sorts of things, and we had labor to extract these minerals. You either imported from China, but you also exploited the labor that you found in the country, mainly black labor. And you created policies that subjugated black people to being laborers for the rest of their lives. So we'll have policies that guarantees white males to be employed in the mines, so what you call job reservation. Okay? So I want you to have that back at the back of your mind. So for over 50 years of that, of subjugation, discrimination, that's what defined South Africa. And intermittently you had black uprisings challenging the system that led to the banning of lots of political parties, including the African National Congress. You had people leaving the country, operating from exile, and we had numerous people all over Europe and North America participating in that struggle to get South Africans free. And you did exactly that. In 1994, you became free. Political power you achieved, but you never touched the economy of that country. You left it intact as is. And now as a policy maker and as a government, when you realize that that was the case, you have attained political power, what do we do with this economy? How do we bring in the majority of South Africans who have been excluded from the mainstream of the economy? How do you bring them in? What policy interventions and choices do you make? One of those was affirmative action, that you bring in as many black people and women into corporate South Africa to start to run some of these entities. Second to that was, how do we open up this economy? How do we get black people to participate and get value and be prosperous in this economy? Government came up with Black Economic Empowerment Policy. What that policy is all about really is got 7 pillars in it. It's ownership, is management control, it's preferential procurement, it's corporate social investment, it's skills training. I'll keep remembering the others. On ownership, what we're looking for was to bring in black entrepreneurs to either buy into existing companies or create new industries. But most of us went for buying into existing companies. So if you are started back and you wanted to continue to have business and do business with government, you need to demonstrate to government that you have ownership by black people and women, and that you do have black women and black in general running the operations of the company. And that your preferential procurement is skewed towards black people. Okay. That's black economic empowerment. And social corporate responsibility is that wherever you're operating, you're going to make sure that the communities that you serve and you're operating from benefit from corporate social responsibility. So that's exactly what we did. It created a lot of entrepreneurs and instant millionaires. Good in the sense that it created a strong black middle class. Very strong black middle class that opened up a whole lot of opportunities for other entrepreneurs. Now, everyone talks about black diamonds in South Africa, precisely because you've got this huge huge number of black professionals who have got access to opportunities and can spend the money. So as a business person, you're looking for products and services that can now cater for these people who have been brought into the mainstream of the economy, who would never be been able to be afforded that opportunity. So that's what Black Economic Empowerment did. It had a lot of negative connotations because I think people did not understand what it was meant to do, and a lot of time we focus on ownership. So when you have built your business for a long time, for years, you're thinking, why should I have Brenda in my company? Why should she own it? You know, I've built it for the last 20 years, so she can't be part of this. So what you did was to create a situation where you can opt in and out of these pillars. You can decide to do preferential procurement and skills development and have management control, or have more black women and black people in the business and not have the ownership aspect of it. So the creativity was created for people to be able to do exactly that. But for a long time, we all rushed to be owners of these businesses and realized that we're sitting with huge debts, that we can't pay that equity that we got out of some of these transactions.
Thank you for that explanation. And as we sort of go back to explain going forward, let me just add, again, listening to Todd's discussion about South African Airways, I recall that first time I went back home to the mother continent when I was a 19-year-old in college, when fewer people were going then, that stepping off of Air Afrique into Accra and seeing for the first time in my life blacks behind the airline counter, because I did not see that at the time I was growing up in the States. But it clearly makes a difference when you have opportunity. And this is occurring all over the continent. And indeed, you're getting more and more, the continent is getting more and more, I think, recognition for that. As many of you know, in 2010, McKinsey Company did a report, Lions on the Move, talking about the tremendous acceleration in progress in the last decade. And just in the last few weeks, in this month of March, indeed, The Economist magazine featured, I think, one of its more positive articles and more hopeful articles on economic development across the continent, saying that celebrations are in order. That's right. And that Africans deserve the credit. So as we think about the theme for this conference, tell us why this is Africa's century.
Lots of speech writers, and they all say Africa, this is the economic frontier. And everyone keeps on asking the question, frontier for who? And that's a conversation that maybe we should have. And I'm saying this because when we hosted the new chairman of African Union, Dr. Nkosazana Zuma, that's exactly what she asked. It's the frontier for who? Are we creating all these opportunities for others or for ourselves as Africans? And it's a very pointed question that we need to ponder on. Just 2 weeks ago, Ernst & Young they had their conference on investing in Africa. They brought CEOs from all over and those who are operating in Africa, just to talk about and share their experiences in doing business in Africa. Now, researchers and analysts say that the 7 fastest growing economies are found in Africa. So I'm going to leave it to you to find out who are those 7. I'm not going to tell you. You are students, you do research all the time, so you might have the answer. But that's a fact. 7 of the fastest growing economies are in Africa. So what are we doing about it? There's a move, and I know that for a fact, whether in New York or whether it's in Europe, everyone is looking at how they can access these opportunities in Africa. So maybe, yes, it's our time. But we need to be clear when we say it's our time, what are the rules of this game? that we're going to be playing, and how do we define these rules so that those who want to come in understand the rules of this game. Okay. So you're going to hear from a lot of speakers today on what those opportunities are. But yes, I'm confident, I'm a passionate South African, that opportunities are abound.
All right.
Yeah.
I want to ask one or two other questions before we go to our audience. And in fact, I'm going to skip over to one that I had a little bit later on. And the frontier for whom? Did you mention? We know that there's a lot of international engagement. We know the West is looking, the U.S. is looking, and China is everywhere. And yet there is a renewed hope that of maybe Africa, maybe South Africa, is a leader for the new Pan-Africanism. And that is not a new concept. It goes back to before almost most of us in the room, Frantz Fanon and others. So what are some of the challenges and the opportunities in the Africa's new century and the frontier for whom?
Okay. Now look at this continent and you look at the Democratic Republic of Congo. It's massive if you look at it. And then you've got the South. Don't look at Africa as a country. It's a continent made up of 54 sovereign states. That's this continent. It's got 54 foreign states. It's got language. It's got culture. There's diversity in this continent. There is, with any other country, the development is different for each country, and progress is different for each country. There are other countries that have developed economically, politically, and socially better than others. That's what you need to understand. It's different. So you can't have a one-size-fits-all for all these countries. They're different, like any other country. They are different. It's understanding those differences. And having identified whether those differences, then you can come up with opportunities for your business in these countries. Now, let me give you what the AU chairman said when she spoke to us. She said she was 7 days in her job as the chairman of African Union, based in Addis. And her first task was to go to Mali with the Tuareg rebels, the problem there. So she had to fly to Mali. Her meeting was on a Wednesday. She left Ethiopia on Monday. She had Tuesday not doing anything because the meeting is on Wednesday. She had to leave early because there's no air travel. So she was saying, is this a good use of my time? Even when I was done with my meeting on Wednesday, I had to wait till Friday or Saturday to get back. So Todd earlier on spoke about what they're trying to do with the airline, so that there's ease of movement between people and even the goods. So that it's easy for all of us to travel within the continent. It's easy for most of you to go to France to get to Algeria. So you go via Paris to go to Algeria, or go to go to Ivory Coast, you have to go to France and then get to Ivory Coast. That's what we need to change, so that then it's easy for anyone else to get into a plane and do business and get back. Okay. So that's an opportunity that exists, and Todd has already said SA is looking at it themselves, because they are in a competitive environment. They need to create that space environment for business people like us to travel. And we've made the case as Business Unity South Africa that should happen. We can't struggle to travel within the continent, and it's easy for me to get to the US. but it's difficult for me to get from here to Rwanda or Burundi or even Central Republic. Okay. So that's the first thing that we're advocating for as Business Unity South Africa, that ease of movement within the continent, that we can travel. What is then happening is that when you segment the continent, you realize that West Africa Francophone and West Africa Anglophone and the rest. It's easy as Southern Africa to do business with English-speaking African countries because the language barrier doesn't exist. What is happening is that, and we hosted this meeting last year with French businessmen all over. They came to have a session with us at Business Unity South Africa because they're looking for South African companies to partner with to go into West Africa Francophone because they know the language. So it's a win-win for both parties. And most of our businessmen and women have not been able to access Francophone-speaking countries, West Africa, precisely because of the language barrier. So they shy away from doing business in some of West Africa Francophone precisely because of language. But it's how we create the networks to be able to take up the opportunities that exist in the continent. So we know that there is opportunities. We are encouraging as many business people to come, but understand the regulatory environment of any country that you go into. Most of the companies that access the continent work through lawyers, so lawyers are making a killing advising most companies on how to do business in any of these countries. Your Ernst & Young, for instance, they run advisory services for most companies on how to access Democratic Republic of Congo, for instance. French-speaking, vast country, lots of minerals, but with strife going on in the Democratic Republic of Congo. So the question of safety is paramount for other people in terms of what with the wars and everything that is going on. That is tempering down the wars that are for a long time everyone spoke about disease and wars and famine in Africa. That is waning off because there's a realization, and I think there's lots of leaders who are passionate about doing things differently and leading differently. And that's why I believe that a lot of people believe that it's Africa's time because the thinking is different now. We don't have the luxury of time to sit back and have conversations and strategy after strategy when there's work at hand to be done, so that then we change the lot of a lot of Africans whose life must be changed and changed for the better.
That was very illustrative and informative. And I have several questions, but I'm going to ask one more so that others will have the opportunity. And as we're sitting here with two working mothers up here, that we know that's a busy time, and my own mother, who also was a professor and a working mother, obviously, used to say in her missionary presentations, the hand that rocks the cradle rules the world. Yeah. So as you talked about, for example, broadly based black economic empowerment and its inclusion of women of all races, and I think even in 2008 the Chinese sued so they could be included, so it's a very inclusive concept. Very. But talk about, please, for South Africa and for the continent as a whole, the role of women, of which you are a great role model.
Yeah. Women are leaders, and I think they demonstrate that all of you here are brought up by women who demonstrate leadership. At some point in our lives, we then take a back seat and give the men the opportunity to shine. Not a bad thing, right? And then we decide we're going to come back and then teach and give guidance in a particular way. So there's a huge drive in South Africa. I'm going to start with South Africa before I go to the continent, to bring women into key decision-making positions I'm going to leave the political side of it and talk about corporate. If you just take in the last 3-4 years, how many women led state-owned entities, whether as CEOs or chairmen or as financial directors, the number was growing and growing steadily. Okay? And what we are doing, and Cindy will talk about her experience because she was in one of the entities, a big state-owned entity, is what support mechanism exists for these women to thrive and flourish in these organizations. So you have business women networks that do exactly that, to support these women, because when they get there, it's rough. Okay? You have a system that has told you for a long time that you're a man, you're in charge. And then you bring me, young as I am, to lead, and it conflicts with what you were told for a long time, your socialization. Okay? And that creates tensions in organizations, precisely because our men folk cannot deal sometimes with women leadership. Okay? And I think we have mastered the art of stroking these egos most of the time. Eh? We have. So that then there is peace, and you can go on with the job at hand. So that's, and we're not going to shy away. We're pursuing that agenda very aggressively to get as many women leading as much as we can in corporate South Africa. And we're hoping that in doing so, it will rub off in the other countries in the continent. Okay. Politically, you've had that. You've got 2 women now leading 2 countries. And the more you have more women doing exactly that, the more a society is going to find it acceptable for women to lead, and it becomes natural for them to lead. And no questions will be asked of their competence or whether they're going to be pregnant in no time, and then what will happen to them when they're not at work. Any informal business that you have in the continent, because the continent has got a strong informal sector, it's led by women. Okay? All of it. Because they are go-getters. They are not going to sit and wait for a grant, for someone to say, they want to do things for themselves. But it's what is the support mechanism that is there to ensure that we have as many of these women coming into corporate South Africa, or being entrepreneurs for that matter, is to come up with policies that are conducive for women to flourish and do what they're good at. So Business Women Association, which is a member of BUSA, its role is to do exactly that, to give support to corporate South African women and entrepreneurs, so that then we have as many as we can in the market. No questions asked. It comes natural that you have women leading these organizations. So it's happening.
Thank you for that answer. And I know we're changing our schedule a little bit, but we need to have time for some questions from the audience. Do we have some questions?
Thank you. We talked about China's presence in Africa a little bit. So my question is actually about China's presence, which is controversial. And some say Chinese invest in the economy and help build up infrastructures in Africa. Some say Chinese were there for the natural resources and to export their own labor forces. So my question is, what do you think of China's presence in Africa? And if you have to make one suggestion to Chinese government about their strategy in Africa, what would this strategy be? Thank you.
Let me get the last one. If you were to?
If you have to make one suggestion to Chinese government about their strategy in Africa,
Yeah.
what will this strategy be?
All right.
Thank you.
Oh, I thought we were taking more questions so I can respond, huh? Okay. You know that we're hosting the BRICS Summit now on the 26th to the 27th. So we've got China, Brazil, India, and Russia this meeting on the 26th in Durban. And what we have been doing as Business Unit South Africa for the last 4 weeks was to have mini sessions on what is our strategy as African businessmen and women in engaging with our counterparts from Russia, China, India, and Brazil. So, not to spoil the fun, wait and see what the outcome of that session. But here's the thing. There's a lot of talk around China's role in the continent. Some of it is positive, some of it is negative. The downside of what China is doing is importing labor into these countries where it is trying to do business. And I'm going to talk about South Africa because that's what has happened, that they bring Chinese labor to come and do the work that could have been done by South Africans. It's a big issue at the moment on how we're dealing with it, because you also have unemployment challenges as a country. So when that happens, it creates serious tensions and brings what then we can term xenophobic, because then people would want, you know, these Chinese are here, they're taking our jobs, shouldn't be happening. Now, my advice to China would be to respect the rule of law in any country that they find themselves in, because most of the time they don't. Respect of the rule of law. And sometimes politicians are complicit in them not observing the rule of law, because it's expediency that they're bringing in resources, bringing in money, and so you'll overlook a whole lot of things. And maybe civil society then should be standing up and trying to force their governments not to allow such to happen, because it's got huge ramifications if you let it continue for quite some time. So my advice would be respect for the rule of law in any country that you're operating in as the Chinese government.
Another question?
Hello.
Hello.
A friendly face from South Africa. E-News Channel Africa, I'm Imandra Petty, and we're here as Duke Media Fellows. So it's interesting that you talk about
I thought this face was familiar. Okay.
I'm in your lounge in the evenings.
Yeah.
So, you know, you spoke, in the beginning we spoke about Afro-pessimism, and then we spoke about Afro-optimism. And I really think it's probably the era of Afro-realism, because like you mentioned, it's a complex continent with a complex set of problems. A lot of countries are post-war, civil war, migratory, in the developmental stage, and so on. So how complex is it in real terms for an investor to look at the continent, pick a country and want to invest there? Do you really need to employ a team of technocrats and an entire brains trust? And what is the most sensible and cost-effective way of penetrating countries and opening the doors to business?
That's a very good one. I think most countries, how they came into let me start with South Africa, for instance. I mean, the US is very good. They've got the embassy, and they have their intelligence all the time, informing them of what is going on in any particular country. And what happened in South Africa is that you had most companies coming through lawyers. So they've got advisors on how to invest in South Africa, what is the regulatory environment in South Africa. So that's the first thing that they do. They appoint advisors. You know, tell us, is it worth our while? What is, you know, give us the social, political, and economic environment of that country, and you do an assessment. And I think if you look at the write-up of some of these advisors, you'll see they'll give you the whole story of what pertains in that particular country. You know, at the Ernst & Young conference, Brian Malifa from Transnet said, you know, the perception out there is that it takes 6 months for anyone to register a company in South Africa, when the truth is it takes 2 days to do it. So it's incumbent upon all of us to give the correct state of affairs and facts about what is going on in our countries, you know, so that we dispel all these myths and misconceptions, okay? There was a project to try and normalize and have uniform laws across the SADC region, because it's easy, it's English speaking, which is a project that still needs to continue, because as an investor, if you are sitting here as an investor and thinking, I want to go to Zimbabwe to invest, and I'm told that in South Africa, to register a company takes 2 days, and if I go to Zimbabwe, it's going to take me a year, okay? And that my property can be taken away from me. But South Africa has got a property rights in their constitution. You're sitting there and getting very confused as an investor. So how do we make it easy for investors to understand the environments that obtains in the different countries? We're doing it, Iman, through different platforms. We're engaging, as I said earlier on, at the SADC level, where we're trying to be uniform on the tariffs and also we're trying to normalize the SADC region, so that when an investor decides to come to SADC, they understand what is the regulatory and legislative environment in the SADC region. Same thing that is happening with COMESA and the Eastern Bloc, the East Africa Bloc. We're all chasing the same investors, or we'll be chased by the same investors. But what is going to make any investor decide on Tanzania, for instance, is a number of things. So it's politically stable, there's predictability, there's certainty around a whole lot of issues, but also the infrastructure, okay? That they can move around, there's a full financial services sector that allows for things to happen. So my short answer to your question is that most of the time, any investor who has an interest in the continent, they've already engaged the services of an advisor who might or might not know the country, by the way, and gives you something that they read out of the internet and say this is what is going on. But I think what is important is for you to go into that country and get to know what makes it tick in the past. And you're going to have that by going there and engaging with people at different levels and finding things for yourself. Okay. What is the transportation system? What is the banking system? What is the energy power supply here? All those things is for you to go in and find for yourself, because most of the time the information that is given to investors is not correct.
Okay. I understand we've had our last question, but we are fortunate because Brenda, Madam Chairman, will be here.
Oh, there's a question there.
There we go. We have point of privilege. One last question.
It's here. Chiri?
Can we decide?
Here. She's here.
And let's make it a soundbite, because we're trying to get back on schedule.
Okay. My question was regarding South Africa's current state in the economy. And I know The Economist has said that all of Africa is growing quite fast, but I wanted to ask about the potential of South Africa potentially falling behind, given the 30% unemployment, yet there's a labor shortage, clearly a huge skills gap. And as MBA students, we're taught and we're learning how we can impact society and not leave it on the government to fix things. I wanted to hear about your take on how business is going to take the next step forward to start re-educating and educating and starting to diminish inequality in South Africa.
Okay. Can I ask who told you that?
I think The Economist said something about that.
Oh, all right.
That's pros and cons.
When you go into the country, you hear skills shortage, right? We told with all these infrastructure projects that are in the pipeline, we don't have the requisite skills, engineers and all that. Now, one of the organizations that I am part of is what Brandon tried to say. It's a long name with his cat-sitter. What you have in the country, you have sectoral education training authorities. Every employer pays a levy. 1% of their profit goes into that levy. The purpose of those training authorities is to skill the workforce. So there's a drive, huge drive in the country at the moment to, firstly, we have identified the critical skills throughout the country. Engineering is one, accounting is another, across. So each and every sector of the economy has identified the critical skills. So the sectoral training authorities have to intervene as such. So as an employer, when I pay my levy, the 1%, and just not to complicate it for you, how the levy works is that there's a mandatory grant that I get back to train further within my organization and train for my needs as for the company. And then there's a discretionary one that gets used by the industry to train for the entire industry or the sector. If it's tourism, I've paid my levy in tourism. I train for my own needs as a company, but also for the sector as a whole. So there is a push to skill as many young people. Correctly, as you point out, we've got a huge unemployment rate, and young people are the biggest number of being unemployed. So we don't have much time we have to train as many young people as we can, and we're using that money that is coming from the levies that are paid by the employer to upskill the young people and the workforce in general. The shortage of skill, yes, you've got not a crisis. You have to do a lot to train as many people as possible to take up the opportunities in the infrastructure build that you have. So they're going to talk to you about what that pipeline is all about. So you require as many skills as you can to be able to get these projects into fruition.
Let us thank Advocate Brenda Madumise for the chairman of Business South Africa. Thank you very kindly for sharing your valuable skills and expertise and your time.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
So once again, thank Brenda and also Professor Lucy Reuben here, who's been a tremendous advocate for the Business in Africa Club here at the Fuqua School of Business. All right, so we are all very excited about our next speaker, Deputy Prime Minister of Zimbabwe, but we would like to give him time to bring up his wonderful presentation. So please don't leave the room. Stand up, stretch, say hi to your neighbor, give your neighbor a pat on the back, whatever the case may be, and we'll get started in a couple of minutes if you don't mind.